because of Black, but because of JavaScript.
So a client comes to me and says, listen, Mike, I have this C# script and I run it for multiple companies, my clients. What I do is that I go to the C# project, find the web.config file, set the parameters for one company, compile that project, take the exa file and set it as a job. Then I go back to the same web.config file, change the parameters for another company, for some other company, recompile the project, get the second exa, and set it as the second job. And so on for all my companies. How can I make this process more efficient? So I sat down and I thought to myself, if I can make this process more efficient. And I came to a conclusion that yes. And here's the solution. So what I basically did is first, I thought to myself that this web.config file is not dynamic. Okay? You need to set it per company. And that's not good. So instead of delivering the parameters, so take the parameters from that web.config file, we'll get these parameters from the job. It means that through the job, we're gonna pass some key value pairs to the script. The script will validate those arguments, and if they're valid, it's gonna execute. And how I did this? Here's the solution.
Okay, so let's dive into the code. Here's the main function of the script. We can pass parameters here. You see we have an array of strings. That's how we pass the arguments from the job. And we check if the arg's length equals 0, then no parameters provided, and we just return. We simply return, else we continue, and we call app settings dot load and validate parameters. We basically want to load and validate parameters from the command line arguments that come from the job. So let's jump in to this app settings. Here I declared the app settings as static class, okay, and it has two properties. We have a public static object of type config params, and the load and validate parameters function. We'll get right into it. So basically here I declared the config, it of type config params, and it basically gonna serve as the class that will be accessed globally. Here we can see if we get down here below the app settings class, here's the config params, and I basically set its properties to correspond to the parameters, the arguments that come from the job or from the command line. And I said arbitrary set these values, these properties. Is evil mode enabled? For example, CEO name, favorite pizza topping, secret handshake code, and unicorn color X. And you can basically set it to whatever you want to set it, but make sure that these properties correspond to the arguments that come from the job, from the command line. So basically, if you have evil mode here, make sure that it has a corresponding key of is evil mode coming from the from the job arguments, and if the is evil mode enabled wasn't provided by the job, by the command line arguments, then make sure you validate the value. Make sure that your program knows how to handle it. So here I set this class config params. Here in the app settings, I set it an object of type config params. I set here to basically everybody can get it, publicly get it, but only app settings can set it. And there's a rationale behind this, because we basically don't want a function outside this class, this static class app settings, modifying its values. That's supposed to be a configuration manager. So I set this to private set. We don't want outside functions to touch this config and its properties. And here, as we can see, I declare this static, this class as static, and this object also as static. And of course, everything here is static, so it basically, this class and all its properties are basically, and functions are basically, can be reached or be accessible for all the functions and all the code in the application. It basically provides it's basically served as a single source of truth, and that's what we want, because we basically want no matter where you're at in the code to type app settings, for example, config CO name and get the CO name. That's what we're doing. We basically implementing a dynamic configuration manager, and in order to do that, we must set it as static. So let's get back to our call. We were here on main. The arguments came. Now we came here and try to validate them. So let's go to that load and validate parameters inside the static class app settings. First, we pass the arguments. We basically, they come in the form of array. We basically turn them into a string separated by space. If you don't know what is string join, you can search on ChatGPT or on the internet. It basically, concatenates all the elements of a string array using a specified separated between each element. So we basically get this, turn this array of strings into a string. Here we have a key value pair. So we basically take this string and split it, okay? Now, the convention I chose is basically to deliver the parameters that way. A key value pair, basically key 1 equals value 1, semicolon, key 2 equals value 2, semicolon, and so on and so on. Here's an example, and it matches the config param class we saw earlier. That's what we're gonna deliver in our job or command line, and that's what basically we're trying to split here. So we basically split the key value pairs, and then we continue. I declare the dictionary of key of type string and value of type string, and we basically iterate these key value pairs and populate the 10 params dictionary. What I did here, since it's a key value pair, I take each pair and split it. So we always take, for example, the key, it will be in index 0 and the value will be in index 1. So here, basically, what I do, I take the key, trim it from leading zeros, and then set the value with, again, another trimming. Basically, I did this in order to avoid this kind of scenario, for example. When the user, basically the caller, the user who called the job does something like this, you see? So basically I'm removing leading spaces. Also, I want to remove quotation marks. That's why I trim from quotation marks. So that's what I do. Let's return it back like this. So now that the temp params is populated with the key value pairs, we basically set here the config that we declared here. We basically assigning a new object to it. Now, why we do this? Because since the app settings is a single source of truth, it's a static class and it's shared among all the functions and code in this app. I want to avoid the situation when someone already said this. Okay, for example, some thread used or some function said this, and then called load and validate parameters, and then some other code called the load and validate parameters again. So I basically want to reinitialize the config params. Of course, you can avoid this. You can do whatever you want to do in this case, and then starting to populate this object. So here in the temp params we have the key value pairs. So I'm trying to get this value and parse it, and set the property config.co name. Of course, if it's unsuccessful, if there are no other white spaces, it's an empty string, or we just can parse or get the value, then I wrote X, missing CEO name. Every evil empire must have a CEO. Ha ha ha. And here we have another. We go for the second property. Remember, the config is of type config param, as declared here, and it should match the arguments coming from the job or from the command line. And again, we go here, validate if it's, in the way we want to validate it. You see, evil mode is activated, proceed with caution, ha ha ha. Here we set the topping, the handshake in the same way. Again, you can do whatever test you wanna do, any validation you want to do according to your business logic. And if all went well, we return true, and the configuration management is ready, and we can use it everywhere in the code. Now we finish. Let's just say we didn't return. We managed to parse everything successfully, validate and parse everything successfully, return true. Let's jump back to the main function. So in this case, validation doesn't fail. So we go here, we continue, and now we can take that class and use it wherever we want in the code. We'll just have to type app settings config, for example, CEO name. And that's basically how to create a dynamic configuration management or manager. Now let's go back to the app settings class again. I used 3 design patterns. The first is singleton. That's basically when you define static class and also declare an object. You initialize it in that static class. It's also static, and you can basically use it. You initialize it once, and you can share it. And basically, it's being shared with all the functions and code in the entire application. Here in the load and validate parameters, I used a second design pattern called builder. Basically, a builder is basically when you initialize some object and start assigning properties to it, so that's, you basically build it, Here we did the config, then we assigned the CEO property, then the evil mode is enabled, the topping, the secret handshake, you see, the unicorn color, that's a builder. Okay, that's a design pattern called the builder. Alternatively, you can set, for example, car, new car, and then model, just go by a certain business logic. You just run through a certain business logic, and you assign properties to it. That's the builder. So we already have the singleton and the builder, and the third most important design pattern that basically uses these two pattern is the configuration management or the configuration manager, because the purpose of all this is to basically replace our dependency in on the web.config file or the app settings file. So instead of taking your parameters, from some static file, you pass it dynamically through a job or through command line, and then you can use it throughout the application. So here again, like I told you, we can access all the variables here. You see all the properties here. And instead of, before that it was talking about my client. Before that, this code was, you had the class that basically read from the app settings. It was declared somewhere here. And instead of web app settings, not app settings, it was web configuration dot a web app settings, So instead of reading it from some file, configuration file, you pass it dynamically in runtime, and that's how you achieve it. I think long time I didn't touch C#, so it was very surprising me that I forgot that you cannot actually declare global variables. So this is basically an alternative. So but you learn. I think I love C# really, a great language. So that's how you achieve it. Now we're gonna run this. Now I'm gonna run you how to basically simulate a job call, or in real life, you're gonna run this script in Windows. You're gonna declare Windows job, and you're gonna pass the parameters. But if you want to simulate it, you basically go here to the console app, okay, to debug general, open debug launch profile. Again, here we do a right click on the project name, properties, general, open debug profile. And here I already, you basically, I decided upon this convention. I just took, key value pairs separated by semicolon. I paste it here. And it's pasted here. Now we're gonna call it and we're gonna run this program and see what's happening. So we're gonna press here, and is evil enabled false, CEO name Dr. Doom. What company is that really? Favorite pizza toppings anchovy. Oh shit, what company is it? It's strange. I don't want to know this color really. I don't ChatGPT gave me this parameter. This value, I don't know. Job completed. Okay, so we ran it. And that's it. That's how you can create a configuration manager or management. My name is Mike Berginski. This is Really Red Eyes. Feel free to comment me. Feel free to ask me questions. Send me emails. Feel free to bother me. And thank you very much for listening. That's the first episode of Really Red Eyes. And bye for now.